Hello and welcome to a special edition of To The Point. My guest today is Theo Sommer. Theo is a German newspaper editor and an intellectual. He joined the prominent German newspaper Die Zeit in 1958 and rose to become its editor-in-chief and publisher. Currently, he is editor-at-large of the newspaper. Theo specializes in international affairs and strategic relations. Theo, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me begin by asking you that you've engaged with international affairs for 50 years. You were in the government of Helmut Schmidt. Tell me, do you find that the international order today is more insecure, more uncertain, and how do you date these developments?
Well, I think it is more uncertain. Ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, a new world order has been evolving, and we don't quite know yet which shape it is going to take.
You see, the US used to occupy the predominant sort of space in shaping world events. You yourself have written that it has lost that space and it's now only a preeminent player on the world stage. Do you think the slippage has taken place because of internal instability, economic problems of the US, or has there also been a slippage in the moral position of the United States?
Well, it's been both, or actually I see three reasons. One is that the American wars in the Middle East didn't turn out well. Secondly,
didn't turn out well means what? Were they justified? For example, Iraq now they say was not a justified
Iraq was
war.
not justified, and it was a war of choice, and it did not come out well for the Americans nor for the Iraqis. Then Abu Ghraib and similar incidents undermined America's moral stance. And thirdly, their economic system, it caused a world crisis now twice within a decade. So I still think the Americans will remain preeminent for several decades to come, but they'll no longer be predominant. The question is, will anyone else achieve predominance?
But before we come to that,
Yes.
Do you think America today has a strategic vision for the kind of world order it wants?
I think President Obama has one, but his Republican opponents have a different one. So there is gridlock in the States at the moment. And unfortunately, Europe is also so involved with its own crises that you don't get many fresh ideas from there.
But what are the consequences for the world of this slippage in the US position?
Well, they will not have the same kind of influence they used to have, which doesn't mean they will have no influence at all. But there are others who want their place in the sun, like India, like China, like some of the other emerging countries, the next 11 or whatever you want to call them.
But why has Europe, despite the European Union, not emerged as an alternative player in shaping world events? Is it once again because of the economic crisis in Europe, or are there reasons to be found elsewhere?
Well, I think the immediate reason is the economic crisis. It claims all of our attention, trying to save the euro, trying to regulate the financial industry, settling questions like migration. All that is really absorbing our leadership. But you know, what really happens, what I see, I'm a trained historian, this is the third historic shift of power and wealth. The first one happened in 1500 when Europe became dominant for almost 500 years. The second one happened around the end of the 19th century when America entered the scene. And the third one is happening now when power and wealth seem to be shifting to Asia.
Before we come to Asia, let me ask you, why have multilateral institutions failed in shaping the world? The UN has failed. IMF, World Bank don't have prescriptions for the future. G8 doesn't have them either. So, how come these institutions which are set up with so much fanfare, with so much expectation, are today unable to diagnose the problem or suggest long-term solutions?
Well, the thing is, the UN suffers from the veto of the 5 veto powers in the Security Council, and if they can't agree, nothing can happen. The IMF and the World Bank, of course, have to adjust to the new situation, and the new claimants coming in, and the G8 and the G20 just are faced with problems they've never been challenged by before.
So you have a situation where the old order is changing, but the new order is yet to emerge.
This is exactly the point. The old order is finished, and the new order is just emerging. And at the moment, we used to have the bipolar world with the what did you call the non-block
NAM, non-aligned movement.
Yes, non-aligned movement. Then you had, after the end of the Cold War, about 10 years of American unipolarity. And at the moment, I think it's no one's world. And I guess it will remain no one's world for some time to come.
But isn't there an attempt to sort of hold on to older institutions, pretend that the older institutions work? The US still pretends that it is shaping world events. So, isn't there an inertia which is built into the system for change?
I don't think that the US still pretends to shape world events. In fact, I think they are walking away from wars. At least Obama wants to walk away.
Syria? Iran?
They will not be able to completely leave the Middle East because of Iran and its nuclear program, and of course because of Israel. But they will not get involved. They were leading from behind in Libya. They haven't been doing very much now in Mali. I think they will try not to get involved with military force for some time to come.
Okay. But this new order that's emerging, yes. You're hinting towards China, India, Brazil. Yeah. But have these countries shown any engagement with world affairs or any understanding of the kind of tectonic changes that are taking place?
Well, I think they have to make up their minds whether they want to change adapt the existing institutions to the new situation, or whether they want to break up the existing institutions and create new ones. My own preference would be for them to adapt to these institutions and to change these institutions by doing so. But they haven't made up their minds yet, at least the Chinese haven't.
Okay. We need to take a short break at this juncture. We'll be back with this discussion after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Theo Sommer, editor-at-large of Die Zeit. Theo, let's talk about Europe. Why is Europe in the shape that it is today? Is it irresponsible lending? Is it inadequate regulation? Is it because of the big real estate bubble which burst? Or is it because of the size of EU, the sheer size, 17 heterogeneous nations, all together in a single currency zone, which is unmanageable?
There are multiple reasons. One of the reasons certainly is the economic crisis, which is the worst we've experienced in more than half a century. Another reason is the fact that Europe grew very fast. We added 10 new members, formerly communist countries of Eastern Europe, and Malta and Cyprus during the last decade. And we did not perhaps pay enough attention whether they were ready for it. And the third reason is that the European Union is split. We are 27 members, we'll be 28 this summer when Croatia joins. But the eurozone is only 17. And their interests are not totally congruent or compatible. So there are several reasons. But you'll probably ask me what will happen in Europe.
Okay, go on.
And I'm quite sure Europe will come out of this crisis stronger than it was at the start of the crisis. This has happened before. And I think within 3 to 5 years, we will have climbed out of the hole in which we find ourselves.
So you don't agree with the proposition that having different economies at different stages of development under a single currency zone was a hazardous proposition in the first place?
Well, it was the political will of our governments at the time to go ahead. And then they were so busy with the consequences of the end of the Cold War that they forgot to provide the political, financial, tax underpinning for the euro. And I think we are now in the process of providing the infrastructure which we missed providing 10 or 20 years ago.
Do you think that the EU and the eurozone actually creates problems for some of the countries within the European Union? And what happens in these countries then affects the entire EU, and these countries could be in the periphery like Cyprus or Greece or Ireland?
Well, Cyprus and Greece are in the eurozone, so they share the common currency. But Greece doesn't, the GDP of Greece doesn't amount to barely 3%, and Cyprus is almost invisible. Now, I don't know what is going to happen now that the Cypriot government has rejected the deal they made. We made the deal because we thought that if we don't do it, the contagion will
spread,
go to, affect Portugal and Spain and even France and Italy.
So why was Cyprus allowed into the eurozone in 2008? What difference would it have made if it was not in the eurozone, except to the Cypriots and to the Russians who parked their money there? Because today, because of this crisis, this small country which has a population of about 1 million and whose GDP is 0.5% of the entire EU GDP, threatens to affect the economies of other countries of Europe.
I thought it was a mistake to bring them in as long as they didn't sort out their own problem, the problems between Turkish-occupied northern Cyprus and Greek southern Cyprus. We missed that chance, and I'm afraid we missed it for the second time. We should have told them, we'll help you if you finally settle your problem on the island. I don't know what is going to happen, but there is, of course, a claim to solidarity, except the Northerners then say, solidarity, okay, we'll pay, but then see to it that there is solidity on your part.
But is it a good idea when you want to rescue banks to tax people who have deposits in those banks? I mean, 6% tax on deposits. The Russians who had parked their money there, the super rich, they are taking their money out, and the poor Cypriots whose hard-earned savings will now be taxed are left holding the baby. And let me ask you again on Europe, how are people reacting to the austerity measures in Greece, Italy and France?
Well, there people are reacting with indignation. They're protesting, there are huge demonstrations. And personally, I think that we have gone too far with our austerity policies, because youth unemployment in Spain, for instance, is 58%. It's 38% in Italy. In Greece, it's more than 50%. And we alienate people, you know, if that's what democracy does for them, they'll turn it against democracy. So I think some austerity is indispensable, but at the same time we need a growth program for them so they at least see some hope, a perspective of better times.
So what you're saying is something very important. You're saying high inflation and high unemployment actually threatens the democratic process in Southern Europe. In what way? In what way does it threaten it?
Well, because people say the government doesn't serve our needs, even our minimum needs. It does, I just don't know. And the Germans are beginning, or the German government is beginning to realize now that we have to help them to grow again. We can do that in Greece, for instance. You know, we can make it the solar energy park of the whole of Europe. We would then have to build grids to Central Europe and Eastern Europe, but that would be something that would give people jobs and hope.
But if not democracy, then what kind of political system do you see emerging by default?
I don't see it emerging yet. I just remember that both Greece and Spain were dictatorships 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and I have good friends in Greece, and they tell me, some people say, it was better under the colonels.
Okay, on that ominous note, we have to take a short break again. We'll be back to this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Theo Sommer, editor-at-large of Die Zeit. Theo, let's talk about Asia now. You know, this big talk about 21st century being the Asian century. Now, this business of the Asian century, it's a bit difficult to understand. Is it a specter that haunts the West, that there'll be job losses to Asia? There'll be because of offshoring, because of outsourcing, and therefore it becomes a political excuse for inward-looking economic policies, inward-looking politics, blaming others for your lack of innovation.
Well, you know, first of all, the question whether the 21st century is going to be the Asian Pacific century reminds me of Zhou Enlai. When he was asked what he thought about the French Revolution, he said it's too early to tell. I mean, it's still very early days, and I don't think it's the old notion of the yellow peril 100 years ago. I don't even think it is offshoring and job losses, because we've managed quite well, and we've discovered that we may lose some jobs, but we've gained enormous markets, more in China, by the way, than in India so far. So I think we've been gaining from the emergence or re-emergence of Asia rather than losing.
Good. So you're saying there's no need for the West to be apprehensive. And actually, not only can you gain markets, there's also a possibility that Western economies will become more innovative and more entrepreneurial.
Well, I'm quite sure we can survive if we remain innovative, if we are at, you know, the cutting edge of technology, and so far we are.
Yeah. So you see that this process is carrying on.
Yes.
Okay. After the economic slowdown in Asia, both China and India are slowing down. Do you still think that because of their demographies alone, these countries will emerge as great powers, or would they need to do more than that? You know, do more than produce more kids?
You know, demography or a huge population can be a strength or a weakness. You have different problems in China and in India. China is likely to grow old before it gets rich. You have half your population under what, 15 or? So you are very young, but you have the same problem. You have to provide millions of jobs, new jobs every year to the up-and-coming generation. And you'll be, China is the second largest economy of the world now. It will soon be the largest. You will be a bit behind, but you'll be the second largest within 10, 15, 20 years. But that doesn't mean that you will reach prosperity for all. Your per capita incomes will remain quite low by comparison. So I don't know. I'm not afraid of Asian power. I'm rather afraid of an Asia where there are so many stress lines and fault lines, and where there are so many territorial, conflicting territorial claims that you may call the region Pacific, but doesn't necessarily mean that it will remain peaceful.
Well, you see, take the case of India and China.
Yeah.
Despite sort of burgeoning trade relations and economic relations, the two countries remain rivals, and I would even say adversarial at some level. There are fault lines within both the countries.
Yeah.
There is economic and other social instability in both the countries, and I personally don't see them coming together even as a regional bloc. So, this Asian century could be maybe Chinese century, but it can't be Chinese Indian. It's not a homogeneous Asia because here are countries, through big countries, don't get along with each other. Good relations, but suspicious of each other.
Okay, this is probably, you're right. What I'm afraid of is a new confrontation between the United States and China, a kind of new Cold War, except this time staged in the Pacific. And the Chinese are very assertive, if not aggressive at the moment. I don't quite understand their policy, because they are pushing the Asian nations back under the umbrella of the United States. And there are people in Washington, neocons, who are just yearning for another confrontation and another Cold War.
So in the light of what you're saying, do you think nations in Asia, including South Asia, would continue to be pawns for regional power play and continue to be used by, say, even the US to encircle China or to take on China?
Well, I think what I see missing in Asia is regional institutions, the way we've built it in Europe. Now, you may say our institutions are in crisis at the moment, but this crisis will be overcome. Here I don't see the same kind of institutional cooperation. You do have all kinds of the ASEAN and APEC and whatnot, but those are platforms for debate rather than decision-making bodies. And I think there you have to do much more in Asia to prevent those stress lines and fault lines evolving into front lines.
You keep on using the word Asia Pacific. Now, in your concept of this Asia Pacific, does South Asia figure? Does India figure, or are you deliberately keeping it out?
Well, listen, if I remember correctly, until a few years ago, you were not, you didn't want to be included. But I notice with some amusement that now you are talking about the Indo-Pacific. So there seems to
only a particular author is talking of Indo-Pacific.
Only?
Yes.
But you have opened up. You are now part of ASEAN Plus 6, I think you are in, and you have been opening up towards Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia much more than you were ready to do 10 years ago.
Okay, let me ask you a question about India now. How's the Indian story, the Indian economy, doing business in India viewed from Germany today? It used to be viewed in a particular way, let's say 5 to 10 years ago. Is there any change now?
Listen, I've been a member of the Indo-German Advisory Group for 21 years now. It was set up by Prime Minister Rao and then German Chancellor Kohl in 1991. And we meet once a year, and we started working exactly when you liberalized and opened up to the world. And I'm full of admiration for the progress you've made since. But also sometimes I'm vexed by seeing how bumpy your progress is. There is a lot of stop and go and stop again. And by comparison, China is more impressive.
You used to say, I read a piece by you written in 2006. You said China is today ahead in the race for prosperity, but India is ahead in the race for freedom.
This is
and
true.
Then you said, by the middle of this century, the elephant might overtake the dragon. Do you still hold that view, or have you modified that also?
You know, I've been thinking about modifying it. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't. I wish you the best of luck to add prosperity to your liberty, and I think all the preconditions are there. But at the moment, looking at the gridlock you have in this country and the shortcomings of your democracy, I don't think I'd wager a lot of money at the moment about who would come out first.
Okay. Theo Sommer, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting personality. Till then, goodbye.